Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. I'm David Waybright, and today we're going to be talking about Jorvik, or however you want to pronounce it. It's the next one from Stefan Feld, came out of Essen. It's based on Spezestadt?
Yeah, which is an older
game.
Right. It is a 2 to 5 player game that takes about an hour and a half to play through.
Yeah.
Plays with Vikings, with a Viking theme.
It is a Viking-themed game. It's kind of I wouldn't say auction, but it has a little bit of that vibe where you're like...
Definitely has an auction element to it, for sure, and a little bit of a set collection element as well. Players are going to be playing through 4 different seasons, which is represented by a stack of cards numbered A through D. On the bottom of that is a picked card, which will attack all the players.
Yeah, the picked cards are throughout the deck as well. They represent the sort of the...
invading armies
that you have to fend off.
And that signifies the end of the game when you get down to that final card. So it plays in 2 different ways. You can either play the Carl version or the Jarl version. The Carl version is the more simplistic of the two. The board actually folds in half, and you're just playing with the bottom portion of the game. Also, you're only playing with 3 of your Vikings instead of your 4 of them, and there's several cards that are taken out of the game when you play in the short version, or the more simplistic version.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And the game itself, even in the Jarl version, is not terribly complicated to play.
Yeah.
It just gives you more options. It's a little more thinky.
And it's a little bit longer, too, for sure. In the Jarl version, you are adding the extra worker, and you're playing with this top board, which is an additional auctioning space for the players. You have a set of coins. You have an anchor for your first player marker. Each player has a board in front of them. It explains or has the list of actions or turn orders. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's represented by the different phases of the game. Above the player board is where you have all of your cards that you've acquired that turn.
Yeah, that turn.
And then you load them below into your tableau as the game goes on. Also, there's 2 actions you can take to transform cubes either into a different cube or into money.
Yeah, I mean, overall, what you're doing in this game is building a tableau of cards.
Yeah.
A giant tableau of cards.
That's right.
So, you, like Jeremy said, you acquire them each round, and then you bring them down in turn order. And then, in that same phase... throughout the game, you're going to be able to use resources that you might get to power some of the cards, convert things into other resources or into points or into money.
Right.
Rinse and repeat. You just kind of do that throughout the whole game, getting more and more powerful throughout the game. The other thing that gets more powerful throughout the game, which I found interesting, is this deck of cards you mentioned.
Right.
So, like he said, it's lettered A through D.
That's right.
And it makes sure that each game, you know, a lot of these games, sometimes if it's not done that way, you'll get a really powerful card come out and someone just kind of fortunately gets it early in the game, and it can be a little game-breaking. This one is sorted so that you can avoid that sort of thing, but it really gets a little juicier towards the end.
It's true. To seed the board at the very start, it's going to be empty of the player's workers. You're going to put cards from the A stack or from whichever stack you're going through across the board equal to the number of players. Now you notice underneath these locations they have player counts. So in a 2-player game you're only going to have the first 3 locations with cards, and it goes up with the more players that you have available. And you're going to do that both on the top board, which is called the reserve area, and down below, which is all your trade buildings, which players will be lining up to do. The difference between the two is that the bottom area, people will be lining up in a row, first come, first serve, right, on these cards. The bottom, or the top area, you're actually taking a card and reserving it for just you to be able to purchase.
Yeah, no one else can get those, but you have to have the money when it comes time to get it. Now, the way the lines work, it's interesting. Like we said, it's first come, first serve. But like anything, when there's a big, long line, it means there's a big demand for that product. So it increases the value and the cost of that card. So if you're in a line of 3, even if you're first in line, you're now paying $3 to get that card. Now, if I say, no, I'm not going to get that card, then the next person in line has an option, but now it's only $2.
So let's talk about the turn structure in the game. The very first thing that happens is you're going to seed the board. That's called the supply phase. And you're going to seed them according to the number of players. And then you have the demand phase. This is where, in turn order, each of the players is going to take one of their Vikings, and they're going to decide where to put it on the board. They're going to do that until all the pawns have been placed. Now, when you place below, you're going to place either at the front of the line or behind whoever is in front of you already. When you place at the top, you simply place, as we previously said, and that reserves that specific card for you to be able to purchase. Once that is done, we go into the buying phase. Now, this is the unique portion of the game, and it really drives the game forward. You start here at the bottom, and you go from left to right, and then you go from left to right at the top. You look at the first area, and this is going to cost the player $1 because there's no one lined up behind them. And as David previously stated, the next player could pay $3, or they could jump out of the line and say, I'm not going to pay that cost. It goes to the green player. The green player has the decision to buy for $2. If they choose not to, it goes to the red player, and they can buy for $1 or even defer not to buy it either.
Right, so this game, it's not just about putting your Vikings where you want to go and what cards you want to get, because what quickly becomes apparent is you're also going to be sacrificing some Vikings, basically, to artificially inflate the cost of cards that you know your opponents want.
That's right.
And this can change depending on how the player count. Things can get really crazy in a higher player count, but in a 2-player count, for instance, it can be very cutthroat because you're focused on one other person, so you're usually using, I don't know, two or so of your Vikings to really mess with your opponent.
Right, and money is very tight in the game as well.
Extraordinarily tight.
So you're going to have to be making hard decisions, not only what to buy, but where to place your Vikings. The next, once you're done with the actual buying phase, you're going to do the loading phase.
Right.
So according to, actually, let's talk about this, because we didn't talk about this. Oh, yeah,
reservation row.
That's really important as well. Depending on the number of players in this row, and I apologize for not saying this earlier, the first player has the option to buy, and that's dependent upon how many other cards are in that row.
Right.
So right now, the cost of this one would also be $3.
Yeah, and again, strategically speaking, someone might take a card that they really, really want, and even if you don't have a card up here in Reservation Row that you're interested in, if you have extra Vikings, you'll find yourself putting them on cards just so that you can increase the cost that this guy has to pay.
That's right.
Because the other cool thing here is, if you take a look at his stack of coin, you might see that he has just barely enough to get this first card at $3.
Right.
So then you know that he's going to be out of the line in some of these down here.
That's right.
So there's a lot. It can get kind of thinky at times, actually, when you're placing your guys.
Especially with the more players that you have playing.
Yeah.
So once each player buys the cards, they're going to load them to the top area of their player board, and then in turn order, those players will place them below. Now, it depends on the card that you are using. A majority of the cards you're simply going to take and you're going to place below, and that is either artisans or traders that will be able to power resources to either get you victory points or money in some way.
Sort of the machine aspect of the game.
So, for instance, this guy, during the loading phase, if he's below my tableau, he can spend a gold to get $2. And he's worth 2 victory points for me at the end of the game. But there's a variety of other things you'll be loading. You'll be loading warriors, which can help fight off picks. You have straight-up ships that give you victory points at the end of the game. You have, this is an artisan, and if she has a silk on her, she gives you 4 victory points at the end of the game. Probably the most important one, though, is the ship. The ships don't come out until the B deck comes out, and these will hold a random number of resources for the player. And the resources are kept in that bag, and there are 8 different types of resources. 5 of those resources have 9 cubes in there of that particular type, but 3 of them are very rare, and there's only 3 of them in there. So it's going to be cutthroat trying to get those particular resources. When these ships come out, you randomly put these on the ship, and then if you get them, you're going to actually load the resources onto your player board, and then you can manipulate those down to do whatever you need to do to power the abilities. You can also get rid of 3 of those cubes to get 1 cube from the common good. Anytime you spend goods to do something, it goes to a pool on the board that allows you to use that pool to get other resources in the game.
It serves as the resource pool. At the beginning of the game, there's nothing in there. So as the game is played and as you're converting resources into money and to points, all the resources go there, and that's where you can draw from.
Right.
Now, what's kind of tricky is if you have a character or a card that allows you to turn gold into something, you've got to understand gold is very, very rare.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to be using the conversion of 3 cubes. I think there's a character that allows you to do it with 2 cubes to turn it into gold. But you have to make sure that gold is there, because if the gold's not in there, you can't do that.
Right. There's a variety of other cards in the game. There are end-of-the-game cards called Scalds that will give you victory points depending on either how much money you have, how many ships you have collected, how many warriors you have collected.
Yeah, there's a few end-of-game cards, and then the set collection cards, the Feast or Festival.
There's some building cards that allow you to hold more resources. Your player board will allow you to hold 1 resource from each round to the next. If those aren't used, they simply go back into the common goods area. That's an
important thing to point out too, because if you take a bunch of ships, which are very attractive when you're playing this game, you see a couple ships come out, especially because it takes till round, the second season before they come out. You want to get those things, but if you have resources that you can't use or turn anything into, you can only keep one of them. So it's kind of a wasted turn if you take too many early in the game and you don't have anything to do with them.
Right. There's some cool buildings that allow you to get extra money at the end of the turn. We forgot to mention.
The low-key cards?
Yeah, and the low-key cards. But we forgot to mention, at the loading phase, which is phase 4, at the start of that turn, you get 2 income.
Right.
That's only in the Jarl version. If you did not take any cards into your tableau, say you went a whole round and weren't able to purchase anything because you didn't have the money or someone bought something out from underneath of you, you actually get an additional $1. So you get $3.
A little bit of a makeup.
Loki cards. Those are cool. Those kind of manipulate what other people can do and hurt people. They steal money from people.
Yeah, just like what you'd think from a Loki card.
Right.
And there's only a few of them in the game.
There's 3 in the entire game.
There's 3 in the entire game. They do different things, but they're nasty little cards that allow you to change things up or take a resource off of from someone.
Right.
So it's a nice little variety of cards in this game. There's some engine building. There's a little bit of everything in a tableau building game, and it's all driven by this sort of auction.
Yeah. The one card that you need to be aware of, too, is the pick card. You'll have a battle with the picks at the very end of the game, but as you said, there's 3 or 4 other occasions in the game you have to fight the picks. It's simple. Whoever has the most defense gets that many points on the pick card. Whoever has the least loses that many points on the pick card.
So it's usually like a +1 or a -1 or a +4 or a -4.
Right.
So
it can be a big swing in a 2-player game. In
the 2-player game, which our first game was a 2-player game, and it is a big swing.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten to the point where I'd kind of settled on the fact that I was not going to beat you in Warriors. So, I mean, the bad news was I lost a lot of points because of it. The good news is I didn't waste any of my time going after those Warriors.
Right.
That would totally change in a 3- and 4-player game for sure.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts?
I like it all right. I love Stefan Feld, as you know. I would say this is probably not at the top of my Stefan Feld list.
Right.
But it's an interesting game. I've never seen a game like this from him with this sort of auction mechanic. A lot of the mechanics you see throughout a lot of his games, no matter what the game is, a lot of those aren't present here. Okay. I see the machine building, which...
Typical for him, games like Bruges.
Typical, something like Bruges for sure. But other than that, a lot of the little things that you're used to with dice and manipulation and things like that, I don't see here. Plus, the auction thing, it's pretty straightforward.
It is.
I will say this, it's a very simple game, and there's sort of a good and a bad to that. You know, it's good in that it's sort of the elegance of simplicity in terms of how you're playing a game. Right. Anyone could probably play this game. I will say this deck of cards really benefits from a play or 2.
Yeah.
Because on our first play, you have no idea how many picks are coming.
Yeah.
So you don't know what you really need to go after. You don't know, or you don't have an appreciation for the amount of resources that are in the bag. I mean, I knew that there were only 3 gold and 3 silk and things like that, but I didn't really think about that, how it related to the machines I was building.
Right.
So it's definitely one of those games that benefits from a few plays.
Right.
If you're going to sit down and play this, if you've played it a lot and you're sitting down with a bunch of new players, you will probably destroy them.
Yeah, I would agree. What is your thoughts on the graphic design, too? Because I know you and I both had some issues with it, especially the board itself. It seems, I'm not sure if this is in the production, but the board seems to be miscut. You have some of the track that's off the board.
My guess is that that's probably just our board.
But the artwork itself, you weren't a giant fan of.
The artwork is not the greatest. But that said, no offense, the artwork in a lot of Stefan Feld games isn't the greatest.
That's true.
Some of his newer stuff I really like, and the way some of it's gone. But some of his older stuff, graphically, is a little dry. It's where it's the gameplay that really gets you in a game like this.
I like this. I played the special stats years ago, probably 5 years ago. It's been a while.
At least.
Very, very similar game. Different look, of course. I like it. I like it, the fact that you have these workers out here, and that it's not just trying to buy the resources which you need to power your engine, but also you're using them, as you said, to block out other players from buying those. Because at that point, it becomes very mathy with trying to decide on how much money does he have. I know that if he uses that money to buy that, he's not going to buy that number 3 card up there, which means that my stuff's going to get cheaper, which will allow me to buy those cards that I need to buy. And I love that portion of it, because you're using a very limited amount of workers to do all those different kinds of actions.
There's great decision making in the game. There's a lot of nice little decisions you have to make during the auction phase, for sure. When it comes to your own tableau, there's not a whole lot of decision making. I mean, you're pretty much getting what you can get and using what you can use as best as you can.
Right.
The decision making happens all here out on the board. I will say, much better 4-player game than a 2-player game.
I would agree.
A 2-player game, it feels a little. It can be a little punishing, I think. I mean, we were pretty close in our 1-2-player game, but then by the end,
there was like a 50-point swing at the end.
Yeah, you just blasted away from me. So, and again, that was our first game. It was our 2-player game too. So.
And also, I mean, there's issues with if you're picking the same resource to convert into different things. Some of the resources let you to convert them into points. Some of them let you to convert them into money. And if you're picking those same things, you're not going to be able to use that same resource to power both of those buildings.
Yeah, and that's something I did in our first game. It's something you just have to avoid, and you have to get a game or two under your belt before you really understand all that.
Yeah. So, guys, that is Jorvik, whatever you want to call it, from Stronghold Games. Make sure you guys make comments below in this YouTube channel. Please subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook and all the other social media aspects that we do. And catch us next time on Man vs. Meeple.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.